Good morning. I'd like to call to order the open meeting for Thursday, March 14th, 2024, and ask the Commission Secretary for information on today's agenda.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the minutes of the open meeting of Thursday, March 7th, 2024, and each has informed me there's no need to discuss the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes from the open meeting of March 7, 2024.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Commissioner Nieto is recused from agenda item 2. Chairperson Strand has reviewed this notice and has informed me there's no need to discuss it. Each commissioner has independently reviewed the agenda and each has informed me there's no need to discuss the notices associated with agenda items 3 through 18. Commissioner Nieto is recused from discussion on agenda items 19, 20, and 22. Chairperson Strand has informed me there is no need to discuss the minute associated with agenda item 19, agreeing to dismiss the proceeding by joint execution of a consent agreement between the Commission and Wisconsin Electric Power Company gas operations, and accepting the proposed consent agreement as drafted, which includes a forfeiture against WEGO of $40,000 in addition to the procedure revisions outlined in the memorandum. The suggested minute associated with agenda item 20, agreeing to dismiss the proceeding by joint execution of a consent agreement between the Commission and Wisconsin Gas, and accepting the proposed consent agreement as drafted, which includes a forfeiture of $70,000 against Wisconsin Gas, in addition to the procedure revisions outlined in the memorandum, or the draft final decision in docket 9813 CE 100 associated with agenda item 22.
Thank you. I approve the notice of investigation associated with agenda item 2.
And I move to approve the notices of investigation associated with agenda items 3 through 15.
Second, all in favor?
Aye. I move to approve the notices of proceeding associated with agenda items 16 through 18.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
And in dockets 6630 GI 100 and 6650 GI 112, which are agenda items 19 and 20, I approve dismissing the proceedings through joint execution of consent agreements consistent with the Secretary's description for agenda items 19 and 20. And then for agenda item number 22, I approve the draft final decision as drafted in docket number 9813 CE 100. Which brings us to our one discussion item for today, item number 21. And Commissioner Nieto has agreed to lead that discussion, so I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you, Chair Strand. I'm excited for our discussion today and for the opportunity we have to fund clean energy and efficiency projects in Wisconsin's rural communities. The Rural Energy Startup Program, which I'll refer to as RESP or the program, is a single round grant program. It's funded through the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Program. This is funded out of the bipartisan infrastructure law, and it's being administered by the United States Department of Energy. The state of Wisconsin was allocated a budget of $2,330,720 for rural communities, and this is for rural communities whose populations don't meet the thresholds for receiving direct EECBG funds through the same infrastructure law. So these are the smaller rural communities in Wisconsin. Communities that did meet the threshold received approximately $4.3 million through the bipartisan infrastructure law as direct allocations to the communities. So the commission has the $2.3 million budget and made a decision to allocate that full budget to these RESP grants that we're discussing today. Pursuant to DOE's guidance for this funding, the purpose of this program is to advance energy innovation by expanding access to clean energy, efficiency, and preparedness to rural Wisconsin communities that are otherwise unable to adopt these and for whom these are innovative approaches. The projects approved for these grants will have approximately 1 year for completion. So the projects will begin in calendar year 2024 and conclude in 2025. The commission authorized up to $75,000 per project, and a project can fit into one of 3 established activity types: comprehensive energy planning, renewable resource planning, and then we have building upgrades, retrofits, or energy audits as the third category. I'd also note that this program is covered by the Justice 40 initiative, and so it's subject to the federal goal that 40% of all investments of federal funding toward clean energy and climate solutions should go to disadvantaged communities. Therefore, the application review criteria includes a priority for disadvantaged communities. I'd like to say thank you for the great engagement efforts, outreach, and the excellent process that's been run so far by our Office of Energy Innovation staff. And also thank you to the 20 Wisconsin communities who have proposed projects thus far. And we have a great batch of projects in front of us. I'll pause there to give an opportunity for any opening remarks that Chairperson Strand would like to make.
Thank you, Commissioner Nieto, and thank you for that great description of the program. I just echo your excitement that we're able to do things like this for our smaller Wisconsin communities, and also echo your thank yous to the OEI team and the TSEA team for getting this up and ready for us. I think they did a great job. Like you said, outreach, we talked a lot about that in our discussions, and I think they tried to touch as many communities and organizations as they could to let them know about the existence of this and their eligibility. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. So we have a few decisions before us, and I'll note at the outset here that we are working on this program on a 180-day deadline from the U.S. Department of Energy. And that deadline expires on May 11, 2024. And I state that up front because it's a key contextual factor in the how and why of our discussion today and some of the decision points we'll be touching upon. I do also understand that DOE has generally been fairly flexible with states in its programming on deadlines and has indicated that it is potentially issuing some deadline extensions of up to 60 days to states, but we are working on a May 11 deadline here. Of course, that is DOE provided 180 days to launch and implement the program and award the grants. We're one of the few states using this competitive process that we're using, and 180 days is a fairly tight timeline to run a full competitive process like this. So our team has really gone above and beyond in the time given to do a grant program that follows all of these best practices. I will note that also during this timeline, as Commissioner Strand mentioned as well, our staff has performed extensive outreach to make this funding as accessible as possible to rural communities who haven't engaged in our programs before, which can be challenging. Staff sent over 5,000 emails to stakeholders and potential applicants and made almost 200 direct phone calls to disadvantaged communities. So staff went above and beyond and continue to go above and beyond to maximize these federal dollars and get them to our communities. With that, I'll note that we initially released application instructions with an initial deadline of January 31st, 2024 at 1:30 p.m. And as that deadline approached and outreach continued, it became pretty clear to staff working on the program that we were not going to receive the number of applications that would use up all of the funding. And so there was opportunity to do more outreach and to extend the deadline further and try to get this funding out. So at that time, the team worked with the delegated commissioner at the time and announced an extended deadline. So on January 30, before the initial deadline expired, the application instructions were modified and provided for an extended period. Basically, any application not received by that first deadline would fall into the extended period. Applications under the extended period would generally be due on March 29 by 1:30. And there were notes in the application instructions that that second or extended process would also be subject to our discussion here today, so that applicants coming in under the extended deadline were aware of that, that there may be further process and timeline instructions. So all of that is to say that our discussion today does have two general parts. The first part is in that initial process or initial deadline, discussing the eligibility and award decisions of applications received within that initial period. And then the second part of our discussion relates to the extended period, how we are going to handle applications coming in under that extended period. And the whole point of this is, again, under that 180-day deadline, getting as much of that budget allocation as we can out into our communities. So in addressing that initial batch of applications, the first decision that we have before us relates to two applications, an application from Town of Lake and another one from Town of Fairfield that came in just after, moments after that initial 1:30 p.m. deadline, and whether or not those applications should be considered eligible in today's initial batch award decision. So I'll share my thoughts on this. I think this is another one of those questions where there are multiple ways to approach it. But in my reading of the application instructions, first of all, I don't think these applications are late because applications are still open now, so there's no way that they're late. However, they did come in after 1:30 on January 31st, so I would consider them as having been filed under the extended application timeline and not under the initial. So I would come in at alternative 2 and consider them a part of the extended batch and not this initial batch of applications.
Thank you. I was at alternative 1 initially just to deem all of them eligible, but I think the distinction that you're drawing about them is important. Overall, I think we're in the same place that we want them to be eligible and included. So I'm happy to join you there.
That sounds great.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then along somewhat similar lines, we have a second question in front of us about eligibility. So we had two applications that have a missing acknowledgement, essentially. So these are applications to do energy audits, essentially. And one of the DOE requirements under this Activity 3 for energy audits and building upgrades is that the audit or the upgrade include an assessment, and the assessment has to have certain specific components involved in it. And our applications ask the applicants to acknowledge that, yes, we're aware that we need this list of components in our assessment, and yes, we have plans to complete those. There was a little bit of misunderstanding, I think, about the phrasing of that question, so staff did some additional outreach to applicants and asked for that acknowledgement. They got back acknowledgement from all but 2 applicants who haven't responded yet. So the question before us in this decision point is, with that missing acknowledgement, are these eligible for funding in the current round, or do we need to decide something else? My thoughts at this time are that these are not eligible for the current round of funding. But again, similar to our late application discussion, I think they should still be open for consideration in the extended batch. Not having an answer confirming that the applicants agree to meet that essential eligibility criteria, to me says they're still not eligible. But I think the positive and lucky part is that they still have until March 29 to answer that question and to have their application complete and be eligible. Because again, these are 2 projects that I think we'd likely look forward to funding.
Thank you. I was initially at alternative 1. I think that even though they didn't change from NA to yes, the description of what they were doing had that audit hook that were in the criteria that they needed to kind of identify in order to be eligible. And I, like you, I do think that these are good projects that would absolutely be a good use of these funds. And I would like us to be able to, as you said earlier, allocate as much of this funding as possible to these communities, because I do think there is a need. But I think your position also leaves the possibility open for just follow up with these 2 units of government to ensure that they will go from a NA to a yes in terms of what they plan on doing, and that they can meet kind of the criteria for the Activity 3 planning. So I can join you at 2. I guess we probably don't need to put this in the minutes, but I would just encourage the staff to make sure that they do another round of direct outreach to applications 653 and 655 to basically make them aware that, hey, between now and March 29th, we need you guys to decide an answer on this in order to determine whether or not you're eligible for this funding. So just,
I would
because
agree
again,
with that as
like,
well.
if they can get it done, let's get them in.
Exactly. And I think to your point, I have no doubt that they will. Their applications gave a very robust list of all the things they were going to do, and it looks like they're going to comply. It's just answering the
Just a
acknowledgement.
matter of the acknowledgement, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And I would say perhaps this is a modified alternative to deem that they are not eligible for consideration of funding in this initial
yeah,
batch
yep.
or at this time.
Yep. But the opportunity to correct the acknowledgement.
Exactly.
Yep. Okay, that sounds good to me. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And then that brings us to the overall grant awards themselves. That leaves in this initial part of the process 16 applications remaining. And I would be at alternative 1 to fund all of those in full.
Yep, I'm there as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, and then we now are moving on to the second part of our discussion, which has to do with applications that come in under the extended period. We already have the 2 applications that came in at 1/31. Applications continue to come in our grant system, and we will have another batch of applications to look at. So I think there are a couple of layers of decisions to make here, but they're fairly straightforward ones. I think the first one is a question that staff teed up and did a nice job just opening up, I think, the most flexibility for us as possible, which is, should these continue to be looked at competitively during the second extended process, or should these be first come, first served in an effort to expedite getting these funds out as quickly as possible? To me, I think with our May 11 deadline coming, we still do have sufficient time to, at a minimum, look at these competitively and wait for that March 29 deadline and look at them as a package. I don't think we can say for certain that we will receive sufficient applications that we will have to prioritize or do a competitive kind of scoring. We may still be slightly under. But just in case that is the case, looking at these competitively will essentially allow us to continue to prioritize the disadvantaged communities and make sure we're not first come, first serve funding grants that are not in those areas over grants that are in those areas. And that would be my preference. Chair Strand, do you have a preference in terms of the competitive versus first come, first served, and then also the question of delegation and who should look at those?
So, thank you. Initially, I was at alternative 1, so delegate those decisions to the delegated commissioner, which is you. And then I could go either way on sub A or sub B regarding first come, first served, or prioritizing to the disadvantaged communities and making it more just to make sure that if it's competitive, that those are being prioritized. I think given the direction of this program and the types of the Justice 40 aspect of this, I think it makes sense to make sure that if those do come in, that they're not just given kind of second thought because of the timing of those applications. So I'm very comfortable at sub B for that one, to have it be a competitive review, and then if there are projects that benefit the disadvantaged communities, that should go there. Did you say where you were on delegated commissioner or on administrator?
I didn't, and I'm comfortable with either or.
Okay.
So I can join you at delegated commissioner and then the sub B on looking at the disadvantaged communities as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I think, like you said, it'll still keep us on the timeline, but also make sure that like the review is thorough and.
We'll have a couple of layers,
Yep.
both of us reviewing. And
Exactly, yeah. And I've full trust in the team and in you to help make those decisions, so, yeah.
No, thank you.
Great.
And we're both happy to escalate any unusual circumstances that might occur to the full commission if that happens. Are we ready for a motion?
Yeah, are you okay? Do you have everything you need on this one? Yeah, that sounds great, thank you.
I move that we approve the Rural Energy Startup Program grants pursuant to our discussion today, and that we delegate the grants applied for under the extended period to the delegated commissioner.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So that does conclude our official business for today. Our next open meeting is scheduled for Thursday, April 4th, 2024 at 10:30 a.m. May I have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn until Thursday, April 4, 2024 at 10:30 a.m.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.